Hello, Arizona, and welcome to this episode of Valley of the Sun Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Jayson Bates, the lender who lives in and is a part of this beautiful community we call the Valley of the Sun, Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, if you want to reach out to me, I definitely want to hear from you, and you can do so by visiting my webpage at www.valleyofthesunrealestateshow.com. From there, connect with me on any social media platform. And hey, if you're looking to purchase or refinance a property here in the state of Arizona, I certainly would love the opportunity to earn your business. So please do reach out to me. Love to hear from you. Okay, so I want to jump right into today's topic. And this one is one that I have been approached with on here the past week, 2 weeks really. And it is how to fire your real estate agent. I've had a couple of people approach me and they're just not really happy with their agent, not really happy with the service that they're providing, the communication that they're providing. And we'll get into that here in just a minute. They're just not really happy with anything. And these are friends of mine. So these aren't really people who are just trying to get out of selling their home, not knowing quite how to do that. These are people who actually genuinely are not happy with the services that the agents are providing them with. And so there's a right way to do this, and then there's a wrong way to do this. And let's go over some of the wrong things first and foremost. You don't want to fire your agent just because you walk into a model home and you don't feel that they did anything for you. You did all the legwork, you talk to the model home representative, and you get the contract, and then all of a sudden your agent gets the commission on that. That's a little unethical. First of all, you shouldn't be going in and looking at homes without representation from your agent. New home sales can be a little tricky if you're not represented quite the way that you should be. Remember, that's a builder. They're going to look out for the builder. Ethically, they should be looking out for both sides of that, but they're there to sell homes, plain and simple. And so when you walk in and don't have correct representation, there could be some things that maybe they don't disclose to you, they're not legally obligated to. Whatever the case, there may be things that you're missing. So just to do that is probably not the most ethical thing to do. And if you feel that you came across a buyer, let's say you had a buyer at work, you're selling your existing home, you have a buyer and you want to get rid of the agent to save some money on the sale of the home. Because remember, if you're selling your home, you're going to pay the commission both for the seller and the buyer's agent. And you want to get out of that. You want to save some money. That's not the most ethical thing to do either. So, keep that in mind when we talk about this. Make sure that you're doing the ethical, right thing and not just firing an agent just because. Now, there are a couple things here in Arizona. You do sign a buyer's broker's agreement, and you do sign some documentation that obligates that realtor to represent you and you to work with that realtor. So keep that in mind. You do have a contract here, so you just can't ignore this contract. Although a lot of people out there do ignore this contract and just don't return the calls of the realtor, that's not really the most ethical thing to do either. I'll just be honest with you. Be a grown-up and call the realtor back and tell them, hey, you're not communicating with me. You're not giving me what I want. I told you I wanted a 3-bedroom home and you're showing me 5-bedroom homes. Why are you doing that? Communication is the key to success on any real estate transaction. That's not only with you and your realtor, but that's also between you and your lender. That's also between the realtor and the title company, between both realtors. I mean, communication, there's a lot of moving parts to it. So communication is key to this whole thing. The other thing, too, that I've recently come across was a situation with a home buyer. I've done their loans in the past, and they have a realtor, and that realtor then tried to steer them to their lender. Now, this couple is very, very dedicated to me, which I certainly appreciate 100%, as I am to them. And so they were put in a little bit of an uncomfortable position when the realtor's like, hey, you need to check out my lender. I really want you to go over there and talk to them. He offers this program that offers free money. And this realtor was telling these people this information in an effort to get them over to their lender. Now you ask yourself, well, why? What's the motivation there? There's got to be some underlying kind of motivation there. The realtor should not be getting paid by this lender. However, there are some things out there that I probably need to do another podcast on this, because this is a little bit awkward to go into. But sometimes lenders pay for things for realtors, for marketing, advertising, that sort of thing. And so that realtor may feel obligated to send business to that lender, otherwise lose that marketing dollar or resource that the lender may be providing them with. So there's that motivation that the realtor could be going after and trying to push this consumer that way. And then there's also the whole issue of just the realtor wants has comfortable or comfort level with that lender and the communication that lender provides this realtor with. They've had a long-term relationship and working very well together. Maybe that's the case. But it's shame on this realtor for even putting their client in this position, because now the client's asking, hey, should I fire? Can I fire this realtor? Am I too deep into this transaction and looking at homes? Does the other realtor or another realtor have something that this realtor doesn't have? And so, shame on the realtor for putting the consumer in that position. But here's some keys, some talking points that might help you determine whether or not you need to fire your realtor. And that is, when you talk about a situation, your voice kind of goes up a notch. You get this anxiety in your voice when you're talking to your realtor. You feel like they're not listening to you. You're having to talk over them, maybe so that they can hear you and really absorb what you're telling them. Maybe there's unflattering adjectives that you think before you actually speak the person's name. So, if you're thinking that this person's, and they're just not representing you, it might be time to move on. Irrational thought process to start to cloud your judgment. This is a big deal. This is the American dream. This is your castle. This is your slice of the American pie. And to have these kind of thoughts when going through this process is not good. Not good at all. In fact, your realtor should become almost your best friend, in my opinion. You should really have some common ground with your realtor when going through this process, and maybe even after the process. Now, maybe you've made repeated requests for something. Maybe the name and number of an inspector, or the name and number of a lender, or the name and number of whoever, and the realtor's not responding to you. It's probably time to move on. That's part of that communication I've been speaking about. And this is probably more in tune now, when that person calls you and you send them straight to voicemail, that's probably time to move on. So when you made this decision that you're going to move on from your realtor, you need to think about how far in the transaction you are, because remember, realtors have a lot of the same information when it comes to the MLS. And in fact, even the consumer, you as a consumer, have almost the exact same information that the realtor has. And there's been a lot of debate here, at least amongst my colleagues, of how relevant the realtor is or will be in the future. Now, I think the realtor will be very relevant. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. Some would argue that, but I think the realtor is going to stick around for quite some time. And so it's not that they're not getting you the information. Remember, the strength of the realtor is the negotiation. The negotiation part, knowing the ins and outs of the transaction, what you may be facing before you even know what you're facing, that's the real key to a successful realtor in your transaction. Not necessarily finding you the property, unless there are pocket listings out there, which there are some pocket listings here in the Valley. And some realtors have those pocket listings or have access to those pocket listings. But if it's on the MLS, you as a consumer, you could find the home yourself for the most part. So that's really dissipated from the realtor's responsibilities. But the negotiation is key, and that is part of the communication. You have to have good communication with your agent to let them know, hey, what's your ceiling? What's the top you be paying or selling your property for? And if they're not listening to you, that's something you probably want to move on from. Now, communication. Communication is the number one reason that people get most frustrated with in regards to their realtor. And it's the number one dissatisfaction amongst buyers and sellers. And it's not that the realtor doesn't hear you or the lack thereof communication. It's a combination of both. So they may hear you and they may say they're going to call you and then they never call you. That can be very frustrating. You're on pins and needles when you're buying a house. And so being Johnny on the spot, and I'm using that term loosely, but being Johnny on the spot as a realtor is critical, especially for first-time home buyers. Now, if you're the type of person that doesn't really care and doesn't really need to have that type of communication, then it may not be that big of a deal. But most people want to know everything. They want to know everything that's going on with this transaction. So I emphasize this a lot to realtors. You cannot over-communicate to a buyer. You just can't, or a seller for that matter. You just can't overdo it. And there's some tools now that I've spoken about on some of the live streaming that I've done, open houses. If I'm selling my house, I want feedback on the open houses. What's the feedback? What are you getting? What are you seeing? What are you hearing other people say? What can we do then to correct it so that the next people that may come through the house in an open house, we can address those issues? What was your response, Mr. Realtor, when they said those sort of things? Did you sell it? Because not every property is going to be perfect, and there's going to be objections on every single property. How did the realtor handle that objection? Okay. Now we've kind of identified communication and some of the things that you may want to fire your realtor as a result of. Now, there are two. We're going to talk about the listing side and the buyer side. So on the listing side, there's listing agreements that you have. And you're going to want to ask your agent to cancel the listing. But this is pretty. It's not just cancel the listing. You want to make sure that the listing is, there's a signed release on this cancellation of listing, because you just don't want them to take it off the MLS. Because then if you go to another agent and they list it, you may be susceptible to paying double commission if the home sells within the time frame of the initial, the first one that you thought you had canceled. If it sells within that time frame of that listing agreement. So if your listing agreement is good for 30 days, you're 2 weeks into it, you cancel that one, or they take it off the MLS, and then you get into another contract and it sells a week later, you could be susceptible to paying double commission. And so you want to make sure that it's completely canceled with that particular agent and their broker and broker's agent. Now, some agents may come back and say, well, look, I'm not going to cancel it. Sorry, we've got an agreement here. You do have recourse as a consumer. You can go to that person's broker and ask for the cancellation. Now, the broker's probably going to want to do some training in regards to why. Why are you wanting to cancel this? What service did we not provide? What expectation did we not meet or exceed? And so you're going to have to be prepared to answer those questions. It's a little bit of a divorce situation, and you want these things to be a mutual thing. You don't want this to get ugly, because they can get ugly. So you want to make sure that you have your ducks in a row. Look, this agent is just not communicating with me. And the broker may come back and say, okay, well, that agent isn't doing that. Would you mind if I had another agent from my agency represent you? And so you have to be willing to do that as well, or willing to at least listen to that. You can say no, of course, and say, no, I'm just not happy with your overall exposure and what your agency's been able to do with me. And if a broker came back to me and said, hey, would you mind another agent representing you in this transaction? My first question would be, well, what is that agent going to do that's any different than the first agent did? Because all the resources are still within that agency. So, just be prepared for a little bit of pushback. You can't just say cancel and be gone with it. It's not like clicking delete on a file, so to speak. Now, canceling on the buyer side. Now most buyers, this is where I probably come into play a lot more with this, because I'm in tune with buyers a lot more by doing the loans than I am with the sellers. And there are buyer's brokers agreements, and you want to get a termination of the buyer's agreement if you're wanting to fire this agent for various reasons. Maybe they're not showing you the homes. Maybe they're not negotiating on your behalf. Maybe they're telling you things that sound a little fishy. Whatever the case may be, you're going to want to get a termination of the buyer's broker agreement. Again, this agent may say, "Hey, I don't want to terminate. I've shown you homes. I've taken you all over town. I've driven you 100 miles in 1 week. Why are you canceling this on me?" And so you have to be prepared for that as well. These things can get very, very ugly, and this is why I think a lot of people avoid them. But always remember this as a consumer. And realtors, if you're listening to this podcast, the realtor works for you. You don't work for them. So be absolutely, I don't want to say boisterous, but make your opinion known to the agent, because that's the only way the agent's going to get better. And that's the only way that you're going to feel more comfortable, is by telling people what you're thinking. And so be outgoing, or be forthright with your thoughts with the agent and the agency, so that you get what you want. And it's super, super critical that you ask for this cancellation or termination of these agreements. That's really the only way to do it, is to get that in writing. Once you have that, then you've pretty much are done, and you can move on and move about your business and determine what you want to do. Now, I will say, before you even get to this point, hopefully you've listened to a previous podcast where I talked about interviewing your realtor. Ask your realtor questions. Now, of course, as a buyer, you need to be interviewing realtors to represent you. As a seller, even more critical that you interview your realtor. This is part of the listing presentations that realtors go out on. And so ask the right questions, and then you'll never have to fire your realtor, because you're going to have the right one from the very beginning. So that's the best way to avoid having to fire your realtor. But if you do get in the situation where you need to fire your realtor, there are ways to do it. You obviously want it done mutually. You want it done ethically. And so doing it the right way can go a long way into your peace of mind and you getting the right deal that's right for you and your family. So with that being said, I hope I gave you some information that you can use. I certainly do appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to what I have to say. It really means a lot that you chose this podcast over all the other podcasts that are out there. It really does humble my heart. So thank you very much for doing that. So until next time, happy house hunting, and I hope to see you out there very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Jayson Bates, NMLS 220798, mortgage banking license 1796, equal credit opportunity lender, sound effects provided by soundj.com.